I'm going to show you the advanced repair process to fix this originally $3,000 Samsung QLED TV. The issue we're experiencing and going to show you how to fix is an HDMI failure. I have my Fire Stick in HDMI 1, which it is detecting, but it won't connect and show picture. It just says no signal. Now this is because of a defective One Connect box. Unfortunately, they are no longer available for sale and used ones aren't always reliable. So we're gonna fix the box on a component level and show you exactly how. First, let's bring the box to our workbench for disassembly. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Nick. I started Nick's TV Repair more than a decade ago, and since then we have fixed over 27,000 devices. For this diagnostic, we're going to focus on the main board and leave the power supply inside the box. Now there's a pretty large heatsink covering the majority of the board, so first let's remove it so we can take a closer look at the components below it. So there's 5 little pins right here that we'll need to pinch and push through. For that, I'm going to use my needle nose pliers. And some of these pins are trickier than others. And you do want to be very careful because there's a lot of surface mount components here that are fragile, and if you slip, you could knock them off. Okay, I do believe I got all of them here, but I am getting a little bit of resistance. And it looks like it's coming from down here. There is a processor next to the connector port with double-sided sticky tape. So just be very gentle, slowly lift it up. And if it's giving you too much of a hard time, which it is this time, we're going to use a little hot air to warm it up and just loosen up the adhesive. All right, that was about 20 seconds of hot air. Let's see, can we get it? Yep, there we go. That was much easier all of a sudden. All right, so let's bring our focus to the HDMI ports themselves. So taking a look inside of the HDMI ports, we just want to make sure that there isn't any physical damage, and there does not look to be. And as you can see, there are numerous data lines that are leaving the HDMI ports, and they're all congregating to this processor chip right here. So this is our main processor, which is also our HDMI processor. It is covered in thermal paste, so let's go ahead and remove that. I'm gonna use isopropyl alcohol and a metal brush. And this thermal paste is very hardened. It's gonna be a little difficult to remove. That's why I'm using the metal brush. This failure can be a bit tricky to diagnose because there are no burnt or shorted components, so we can't use our multimeter to detect the fault. However, as we saw earlier, all of the HDMI ports have their data lines go directly to our CPU, and because we know the HDMI processor is integrated into the CPU, logically, that is the component that is most likely faulty and should get replaced next. As you can see, the CPU has no legs on the perimeter, and that's because it is a BGA type chip. What that means is that there are tiny little solder balls between the PCB and the chip itself that are arranged in a ball grid array, BGA. In order to replace the CPU, we're going to use our rework machine.
In order to properly remove the CPU without damaging either the board or surrounding components, we have to use a rework machine. What it does is precisely heat up the board from the bottom and the chip from the top until we reach the solder ball's melting point. We already have a specific heat profile that slowly ramps up in temperature over a 6-minute period. We are just about 1.5 minutes into our rework profile and are adding flux to the perimeter of the chip. Flux serves as a chemical cleaning agent and heat transfer enhancer. It removes oxide layers from the metals being joined and improves solder flow. This helps us remove chips at a slightly lower temperature to reduce heat stress to the PCB. Now, to ensure we have reached the solder's melting point, we will prod the chip to make sure it is able to move, thus confirming all the solder is in a liquid state. Once we've confirmed this, we can then remove the chip from the board. The replacement CPU we will be installing has the new solder balls already attached to the chip. In order to prep the area for it, we need to remove any residual solder left from the original defective CPU. We will do a first pass with the iron, removing the bulk of it, and then do a second pass with our desolder wick, which will absorb any leftover solder from the contact points on the board. The desolder wick does contain flux which burns up during the desoldering process, so we will need to clean off the spent flux with isopropyl alcohol and a Chemtech wipe so that we can make room for unused flux for the attachment process of the replacement chip. Now we can add our new flux, spread it evenly to all contact points, And finally, line up our new chip for reattachment. Now we are going to run the exact same profile again, but this time it is to attach the chip instead of removing it. The profile is still going to take about 6 minutes. Okay, we are in the final moments of the soldering process, so once again we're going to give the chip a quick prod. And if we see it move but not bounce back to its original position, it means the solder is still solid. If the chip bounces back to its original position, it confirms the solder is molten and the chip attached to the board, which it is.
Now that we've successfully replaced the CPU on the main board, let's go ahead and reattach the heatsink. To do that, I'm going to need to replace the old crusty thermal paste. So we're going to remove it using our metal tool. And we don't need to remove 100% of it, just the area that's going to connect with the CPU dies. And next we're going to remove the double-sided adhesive tape, replace it with a brand new piece. It's giving me a bit of a hard time to remove, so we're going to hit it with a little bit of hot air to loosen it up. Next, we'll notice there is a little bit of gunk left on the processor. So we're going to want to clean that off as well to make sure that our replacement thermally conductive tape is going to make good connection with the processor. Okay, that looks a lot better. So now we can install our double-sided thermally conductive tape. And we're going to use our high-end MX4 thermal paste for the CPU. And finally, we can install the heatsink. Now I do want to make sure we have good contact here on that smaller processor. So I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on it, and I cannot move the heatsink away, so that means the adhesive is sticking correctly. We can now reinstall the board back in the box. Before we do our final life testing, if you have one of these OneConnect boxes that you would like to send in for us to fix, we do offer the flat rate services, which come with a 1-year warranty, and those are going to be available on our website, which I will link in the video description down below. Okay, let's live test. As you can see, everything is plugged back in, and the Fire Stick is finally working again for both the audio and the video. So that does confirm we have a successful repair. If you found the video helpful or useful, leave us a like, subscribe for more content, and thank you for watching.